Welcome to the Spunky Spirit Podcast. I'm your host, psychic medium Carrie Muggs. This is where we learn all things spirit, everything from spiritual gifts, awakenings, ghosts, aliens, and starseeds. Nothing is untouchable, but always fun and spunky. I am honored to be on this spiritual journey with you, so make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Hello, and welcome to this week's podcast episode. And we are going to talk about shadow work and healing. So last week on the question and answers, I got a question about what is shadow work, and I kind of talked a little bit about it, but I decided this week we're going to dig deeper into it and kind of explain what it is, what shadow work and healing is. So shadow work is basically healing. So when we start to go on this journey, this spiritual journey, I really believe like the spiritual journey that we go on is really within ourselves and healing ourselves and raising our frequency. Because when we start to heal and when we start to raise our frequency, then we connect better to spirit or to God or to source. Now, there's always a connection there, but when we kind of go on this journey of healing and look into what's going on inside of us, then we kind of get that load taken away from us and we get lighter and our frequency raises, and so we start to heal. So the word shadow comes from, like in Peter Pan, where it's like where he's afraid that the shadows, he is scared of his shadow. It's kind of like that. It's just like a darker side of us. It's a side that, and it's not really dark. It's not good or bad. It's just part of ourselves that we have a hard time loving and that we try to hide from people or mask away. So, a lot of people call our shadow demons, shadows, skeletons. It's parts of yourself that you just don't love. And every single person carries some sort of darkness or heaviness with them. And I kind of liken it to, I love to watch movies because I'm not a movie watcher, but when I do, I like to find the spiritual meaning to them. So, I kind of love that Star Wars. Star Wars is huge. The dark side, like the Jedi and the dark side, whether you're going to use the Force to be good or evil, it's kind of like that. And also Lord of the Rings, when he had the ring with him, and the ring started to consume him, he had to kind of choose between good or evil. It's always this fight of good or evil. And it's not really like that with shadow work, because with shadow work, it's not like yin or yang. It's like you accept your dark side as it is. You accept it. You process it and you accept it. You don't have to be like, okay, I'm going to choose this one or this one. I'm going to choose good or evil. It's just that you accept yourself as a whole. So with shadow work, we try and figure out things that happen to us during our lifetime, traumatic events, different things that trigger us now. So those things happen to us and we kind of just took that and we dumped it and we buried it inside of ourselves and we didn't really process it. And so now you're going into spiritual work and you're going on a spiritual journey. And you need to process it. And I was a big fan of just taking things that happened to me and burying them and then not looking at them and just being like, that didn't happen or I'm fine. I'm just going to forget about it. But then what happens is later on down the road, these little things start to trigger you or things start to happen and you're like, oh my gosh, why did I just get anxiety right there? Why did I feel so sad right there? And it's because the core of that is somewhere where you buried that and you process that down the road. So that's kind of what shadow work is. We're trying to figure what that is. We try to figure out what our triggers are and their core of emotions. And I'm going to probably talk about the show Inside Out a lot because I think that that's perfect when the emotions, there's different emotions inside this girl and she takes these little joy memories and sad memories and anger memories and she stores them the way. What you didn't get to see is the traumatic section or the traumatic, it's probably by the sadness one, or it could be happy if once you start to heal it, but there's that traumatic but it comes out in anxiety or sadness. So that's why, or fear. And so and anger. So all of those other emotions could be triggered by the other, the memories of the trauma. So now the thing that I want to be really careful with shadow work is a lot of people, say it's spiritual, it's a spiritual movement, you are on this journey. But it is really a mental health issue too. So a lot of times you can, some people can get through your spiritual journey without counseling or mental, really, really just pay attention to your mental health. If you're going and processing some of this stuff and you're starting to heal and you're healing inside, then you might need to seek counseling for some of this stuff, and that's okay. I did seek counseling during some of my processing, and it's totally fine. Spiritual journey and mental health coincide kind of with each other, and you can grow spiritually and go and help with your mental health. It's kind of hand in hand, so don't feel like you can't do that. Now, mental health, some of the triggers are going to be diseases. Well, and I hate that too, because I hate to tell people that they cause their own disease. I don't really believe that. But I feel like if we have enough stress or we bury enough trauma, it can cause disease. I really do. It can make us sick. So the only thing I worry about saying that is I don't want people to ever think that they caused their own sickness or caused their own demons. And we'll talk about that in just a minute too. And some triggers, low self-worth, not being good enough. And so, when we self-sabotage a lot when our shadow comes up. When we start to see things about us we don't like, we are thinking we're not good enough, then we self-sabotage so we don't have to go any farther. We're like, oh, I'm not good enough for that anyways. I'm not an expert at that. And then we self-sabotage. So that's kind of hard. Now, the shadow self was created by a guy named Carl Jung, or it's Jung, and it's referred to as it's Jungian psychology. So I'm not really sure how you pronounce that, and I don't want to kill it, but he says the shadow refers to a hidden parts of us, the parts that we mask or hide from the world because we think others won't like it, or because we ourselves don't like it. So we go through life hiding these memories or hiding these things like I said that we process, because we also don't want other people to see it. That's why people say skeletons in the closet, because we hide these things. And really we need to embrace it and we need to love it. We don't need to get rid of it. We just need to understand it. It's so much nicer when I start to have an anxiety attack, or if I start to get triggered, it's so much nicer to know, okay, I know where this comes from. And it could be something so small. So you could see like a post on Facebook and it could just trigger you to no end. And you are like, why is this triggering me? And it's just because something similar happened, or something that caused that not feeling good enough happened when you were younger or in a later time. And so that just brings up that Facebook post just brings up memories of that. And it freaks you out and you start to get sad, or your mood changes, or things like that. And that's why you have to kind of check it and see what's going on. Now, when we go through life hiding these things or memories, we perceive ourselves differently. And when we start our spiritual journey, we are not only healing ourselves, but we're kind of healing some ancestral stuff too. Because obviously some of our trauma is from some of the people who raised us, or when we were little, and then they had trauma from back then with their parents. And all I want you to know is everybody's just doing the best they can. So sometimes don't blame, own this, own it. Okay, if your parents did a crappy job, I just want you to know, hopefully they did the best they can. If they didn't, don't blame them. This is where you heal. This is where you start. This is where you own your own stuff and you start to heal. So, but sometimes when you go down this spiritual journey, you will have ancestors that will come spiritually to try and help you clean out some of this stuff, clean out some of this long-term ancestral stuff like alcoholism, stuff like abuse, things like that. So that's kind of cool, but it's also hard to process. So just know that you're not alone. So this is when you will get your help from counseling, and you'll also get help from your ancestors and your spiritual line. So we see, and we have to just figure out how we process these emotions. We can't just take these balls like in the movie Inside Out and just go hide them somewhere. We've got and just hide them inside of us. We've got to process them. We got to figure out what made it hurt, what made it hard. So that's why shadow work is painful, and spiritual journeys are painful. So sometimes people think that their spiritual journey is going to be awesome and it's just going to be this rainbows and roses thing. And reality, spiritual journeys are painful and hard. And I had somebody once post on Facebook, not if you choose to, like, she made it sound like it wouldn't be painful and hard if I chose it not to be. And I don't necessarily agree with that, because if you have to deal with your pain and process your pain, it's not going to be a fun ride. It's going to be it's going to be pretty roller coastery. So, I mean, you can decide how you want to receive that information and how you respond to it, but you can't really decide how it's going to make you feel. I mean, I guess you can. You could be like, oh, I heard, I see this trauma thing that happened to me when I was a kid, but I'm going to be happy about it. I guess you could choose to do that, but I feel like that's kind of toxic positivity, and we're going to kind of talk about that too. Now, also too, I also have a lot of clients, and me included, that when you do go through this journey and you do start to process and you start to raise your frequency, you are going to come across some lower frequencies. And I know there's some mediums out there that say this is not true. This isn't true, and you create your own demons, and that's great. Everybody has their own opinions. Everybody does. But I have to tell you about my experience. And my experience is, yes, when I was going through a spiritual journey, and multiple clients of mine that have gone through a spiritual journey, they feel like somebody's trying to stop them, or some lower energies trying to stop them. And I have had experience with this, so I agree with this. However, some mediums and spiritual health light workers feel that you create your own demons, that you start to process the trauma and you start to process all the pain, and it kind of creates its own energy of itself and becomes kind of a demon. I just don't know if I believe that. That's like, I just don't know. I mean, I'm fully, I can look into that or research that, but from my experience, I just don't feel like some of the things that I've seen, and I don't want to create fear, and this is why they think that. I don't want to create fear. I have never, ever had a lower frequency come through during a reading. We are always protected. We are always, always safe. But in my own travels, in my own stuff, have I ran in or seen these kind of entities? Yes, I have. And I don't believe that I created them on my own. Now, some of my traumas could have created some of this, but I just don't believe that, a little 6-year-old girl could create something like some of the stuff. And my mom has had experiences with some lower frequencies, and lots of my clients have. So, I would love to say, yeah, we created that ourselves and it became kind of our own demon, but I just really don't believe that. I just don't believe that. There's too many paranormal things and things out there. So, but I'm always open to learn new things. So, it just depends. Just take what resonates with you and decide for yourself. Now, we cannot always be happy. We cannot always look at our trauma and be like, oh, well, I've decided to be happy about that. Even though that really hurt, I'm going to just pretend to be happy. This is called toxic positivity, and it is very one-sided, and it's not our true selves. We cannot be happy 24/7. Now, we can always try and look to the brighter side of things and always have gratitude, but always trying to be happy 24/7 is just, it's kind of impossible. And we need to embrace the dark side of us, not try and get rid of it, not push it away. We need to embrace it. If we just pretend it's not there, we're spiritually bypassing. We're just spiritually saying, okay, this is done. I'm not going to do it. And that's just taking the ball and processing and pushing it down again. We're not really dealing with what's going on. And it's just because we're trying to avoid the pain. And that's really what, shadow work is too. It's just painful, and we don't want to deal with it because it's painful. And we just kind of hide it because we don't want people to know that about us. Or here's another thing too. Sometimes we do want people to know about it, and we're just trying to seek attention. Here's what I want you to know. If you are going through something or you're dealing with something and you have to tell more than 3 people, then you're just trying to seek attention. So just kind of evaluate that. Like, you can tell your counselor, you can tell somebody you love or somebody who's there with you. But if you're starting to find out that you're telling a lot more people, because you're going into victim mode. So try and just, and I know the truth hurts. It's hard, but but don't feel bad about it. If you're just realizing, okay, I'm telling this story way too many times, then just kind of stop yourself and know that you need to seek help for it, because you're just trying to receive attention for it now. Okay. Now, some of the shadow triggers are going to be anxiety, anger, blame, insecurity, codependency, and jealousy. So jealousy, that was a big one for me. I had this at first when I was starting my business, my spiritual practice. I didn't think I was jealous of other mediums. I just was like, I always felt like I wasn't good enough. Like, I always felt like, oh my gosh, they're so awesome. I wish I could be that good. And then during a healing session, one of my mentors was like, you're jealous of other mediums. I'm like, no, I'm not jealous. I'm not in a bad way. I don't think less of them, and I don't want to hurt them. I just wish I was as good as them. And she's like, that's jealousy. Because just because you don't feel like you're as good as them doesn't mean you're not good. Who knows, you may be as good as them. You're comparing your strengths to their weaknesses, and you're comparing your weaknesses to their strengths. And so sometimes when you feel these emotions, kind of figure out where they're coming from. So I had to sit on that for a minute, and I'm like, okay, why am I feeling like this? Why am I not feeling good enough? Why am I feeling like other people are better than me? And it did stem back to some relationships in high school, some relationships when I was a child. And so now I'm like, when I see that, I'm like, okay, I know where this is coming from. I know why I feel like this, and I know that it's not true. So I'm not going to self-sabotage, and I'm not going to feel like I'm not going to be insecure about it. And that's when I started to be able to do lots of readings and step into my power. So now it's kind of like, you have to face your pain. You just have to face it head on instead of running away from it. You have to master your emotions. Now, counseling is good. We talked about counseling. There is a kind of counseling that I really like. It's called EMDR. It's for trauma counseling. You pick a kind of counseling that goes for you. If you can't afford therapy or you can't afford counseling, that's okay. There's a couple things you can do. You can do meditation. And I would suggest guided meditation right at first, because you can be guided into finding in what's healing you, like healing guided meditations. Also, you can journal. Journaling is awesome for trying to figure out where these triggers come from and where they go. Automatic writing is great for this. Also, you can check and try and find your local free clinics and see if they take any people, or if you could just kind of say, hey, I'm kind of going through this depression, and see if they just check them out and see if there's any local free clinics are in locally for you. Now, why do we have to do shadow work? Because we can't just get rid of it. We need to embrace it. We need to love ourselves as whole, and we need to love who we are. Because if we don't, it will have profound power. It'll have huge power over us. So here's the thing. I want you to imagine somebody coming up to you and saying, you're ugly. Now, this is going to trigger some hurt. This is going to trigger like, oh my gosh, I'm not good enough. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not this. I'm not that. Okay? Because you feel like this might be somewhat true, or you have this insecurity about you. Now, I want you to imagine somebody coming up to you and saying, oh my gosh, you have green hair. And you know for a fact that you don't, unless you do, but just say you don't. And you look at them like, no, I don't. You are not insecure. You just know for a fact, I don't have green hair. And you're secure and you're confident in the fact that you don't have green hair. So this is when you do shadow work. When somebody comes up to you and says, you're ugly, you're like, I know I'm not ugly. I know that I'm not. And even if you think I am, it doesn't matter to me. That's how shadow work works. We need to get to the point where if somebody does or says something about what we do or how we are or what we seem like, we don't care. We don't care. So this shadow work, once we master it, and you'll never master shadow work. Honestly, there's always going to be something that you're trying to improve throughout your life, no matter what. So just know you're never going to be perfect all the time on earth right now. But when we deal with our shadow work, it improves our relationships, and we start to have empathy for others, and we start to communicate better. It actually improves our immune system too. So I read studies on this before, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is kind of cool, because it just helps us feel lighter and feel better about ourselves, and we're not in that lower frequency. So how do we do our shadow work? Well, a lot of times when we're starting on our awakening or our spiritual journey, it kind of just starts to happen, and we start to notice triggers. So when you start to get mad, or when you start to have anxiety, or when you start to get depressed, I want you to look around and be like, what just happened to cause this for me? What just happened, and why did I get mad about this, and where does this stem from? And then meditate on that and see where you can first remember where it stemmed from, and where is that a core of emotion? Like, where's that coming from? Okay. And sometimes you won't really know the core of it because it's generational. Like, alcoholism is generational in our family, but I knew that because I knew that we have a line of alcoholics. So sometimes, and you'll know abuse, you'll know kind of, mental issues. If those things show up, and of course, those things need counseling, right? They do need counseling. So, it is crucial to do your spiritual growth because it raises your frequency. Then you don't feel bogged down. And here's what I love. This is why you have to do shadow work. Hurt people. So when you're hurt and you're in pain and agony, subconsciously, sometimes you hurt people without knowing it. Because you subconsciously or unconsciously hurt people. Now, healed people heal people. So this is why you need to heal your stuff. Because when you heal, people like to be around you. And it doesn't matter. It's not that people like to be around you, but when you heal, you help others heal. And so that's why shadow work is so important. And some people go all their lives without dealing with their shadow work. I think my dad did. My dad, he was an alcoholic, and he didn't know how to deal with the pain. He didn't know how to deal with the stuff. And he died at 51 from cancer. So before he could process some of that stuff, he passed away. And so it's great to start the healing process, because I know that if you don't do it here, I have had spirits on the other side come through and be like, I'm processing stuff from over here. I know that if you don't do it on earth, you will process some of that on the other side. So it's going to happen regardless. And maybe on the other side, your emotions would be better to deal with it, and that's okay too. But it'd be awesome to just know yourself and love yourself here, because what is going on inside you is so important, because it creates what's going on outside of you. So if your world, you feel chaotic and stressed and all of that stuff, it's because that's probably what's going on inside you. So now's a really good time to just check and look at your core and see where you're at, and start to notice those triggers and start to figure out what it is that you don't like about yourself, because you need to turn that into loving yourself. So I love you guys so much. I hope that helps. I have lots of people who ask about this. And so if you have any other questions about this, please DM me or please let me know. Also, too, there is a Facebook group called the Spunky Tribe. I will leave that link in the show notes. People can get in there and talk about shadow work or the things that they're doing. I'll also leave some journal prompts in there so you can kind of know what's going on. Also, I think I am going to do a class in December about mediumship. It will be an in-person class, and there's going to be just a little bit of people who, because my classroom in person is not very big. So just kind of watch for those things if you're interested. They will be posted, and I just want you guys to know I love you so much, and I will see you next time.